I've spoken about nearly all of the virtues now on both sides of the divide, and how rejecting all of these and how amplifying only these is creating a myriad of problems for our society. However, there's one remaining hard virtue that we are rejecting, that we are shunning in the postmodern age, that we've not really discussed or dwelt upon yet. And it's righteousness. We are rejecting righteousness in our postmodern age. And as a result, we are becoming unrighteous. We are currently experiencing this moral slide, this moral decay in our time. Now, righteousness, of course, is a hard virtue because it's unyielding and it's exclusionary. Righteousness says this thing is right, this thing is wrong. Do this, don't do that. Do this and you're a sinner, do this and you're a saint. This is black, this is white. This path leads to heaven, this path leads to hell. This thing's immoral, this thing is moral. It creates a very firm and clear dividing line. And of course, this is what makes it unacceptable to the left. Because as soon as you start talking about right and wrong and heaven and hell, you're creating division and exclusion and marginalization. And this is something that the left simply can't abide under the terms of their virtue set. Now, proving that we are becoming unrighteous, proving that we are in this moral decline is actually a very difficult thing to do, because inherent within unrighteousness is this inability to see it. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "When a man is getting better, he understands more and more clearly the evil that is still left in him. When a man is getting worse, he understands his own badness less and less. A moderately bad man knows he is not very good, but a thoroughly bad man thinks he's all right." This is common sense, really. You understand sleep when you're awake, not while you are sleeping. You can see mistakes in arithmetic when your mind is working properly. While you are making them, you cannot see them. You can understand the nature of drunkenness when you're sober, not when you are drunk. Good people know about both good and evil. Bad people do not know about either. So the more immoral, the more unrighteous a society becomes, the less able we are to recognize that unrighteousness. And the outcome of this paradox is that many of the things that I would highlight to prove our moral deterioration would now no longer be recognized by this generation as being immoral or unrighteous at all. In the same way that our eyes get accustomed to the dark so that it no longer seems very dark, we become accustomed to our sin so that it no longer seems like sin. We can perhaps visualize it like this. Up until the 1960s, it was considered right and proper that sex should only happen within the safety and security of a lifelong commitment of marriage. This was based on biblical teaching which says, "Drink water from your own well, share your love only with your wife. Why spill the water of your springs in the streets, having sex with just anyone? You should reserve it for yourselves, never share it with strangers. Let your wife be a fountain of blessing for you." It also says, "Give honor to marriage and remain faithful to one another in marriage. God will surely judge people who are immoral and those who commit adultery." So up until the 1960s, people lived by this, and therefore if you told people of the 1940s or 50s, say a generation before, that a time was coming when people would be having casual sex with tens or hundreds of strangers, they would have been shocked to hear about that. They would have seen that as clear evidence of moral decline. But when the love revolution happened, of course, casual sex did become normalized, to the extent that afterwards it was considered weird for anyone not to have sex before marriage. The sin no longer seemed like a sin. Once that boundary had been broken, it no longer seemed like a sin anymore. So if you were to say to the people of the 1980s, for example, that promiscuous sex was a sign of moral decline, that would no longer shock them. They would no longer recognize that as even being a sin. They would say, what? People having sex outside of marriage isn't a sign of moral decline. That's normal. Everyone does that. So then you think to yourself, well, how would I convince the people of the 80s that we were on a moral slide? Well, you'd have to look even further down the line at some as yet unbroken boundary. If you said, for example, to the 1980s society that one day gay marriage was going to be legalized, that would have shocked them. Back in 1987, the British Social Attitude Survey asked the general public for their attitudes towards homosexuality. At that time, 64% said it was always wrong, 11% said it was mostly wrong, and 8% said it was sometimes wrong. So combined then, 83% of the British public had some kind of misgivings about the morality of homosexuality. So it would have shocked them to hear that one day gay marriage was going to be legalized. They would have seen that as clear evidence of a moral slide. But fast forward to the early 2000s, however, and of course gay marriage has been legalized and is now considered normal by the majority. Therefore, if I was to say to this generation, to my generation, that gay marriage is evidence of moral decline, this generation would no longer recognize that. They would say, what? Homosexuality is normal, gay marriage is normal, that's not a sin. So what I'm trying to get at here is that if I want to speak to this generation and prove the theory that we are on a moral decline, I really need to look even further ahead at the few moral boundaries that still remain intact, the ones that this generation would still be shocked to consider might be destroyed in the future. And it's for that reason that I predict that on our current trajectory, paedophilia will one day reach a level of acceptance in the West, or at least even if the efforts don't succeed, and we at last draw a line in the sand and say no further, there will still be significant attempts in the years ahead, in this postmodern age, to try to break down that barrier around paedophilia. And the problem is the left-wing philosophy that allowed the breaking of the promiscuity and gay marriage barriers could easily be used to break down the paedophilia barrier as well. You see, the way that promiscuous sex became normalized was because people said, love is love. All love is equal, all love is good. No expression of love could ever be considered wrong. So love however you want and how often you want and wherever you want and whoever you want. And that led to promiscuous sex. The way the gay lobby gained acceptance for gay marriage was by saying the exact same thing. Love is love, all love is equal, all love is wonderful. No expression of love could ever be considered wrong. Man for woman, woman for man, man for man, woman for woman, it doesn't matter. All expressions of love are equal and love is always good. So when gay marriage was eventually legalized, social media was of course flooded with the hashtag love wins. But if this is the way of your thinking, that love is love and love is all that matters, all love is equal, no expression of love could ever be considered wrong, then what stops a brother and a sister saying, well, we love one another, so we're gonna get married? In other words, what stops incest? Love is love, right? All love is equal, no expression of love could ever be considered wrong, so what stops incest? What stops bestiality? What stops a man saying that he loves a sheep or a cow or a donkey and getting married to animals? Love is love, right? All love is equal, no expression of love could ever be considered wrong. And what stops an adult saying that they love children? What stops pedophiles from saying love is love, all love is equal, no expression of love could ever be considered wrong? In the same way that the LGBT lobby framed their fight for acceptance as a struggle for marriage equality, what stops pedophiles from framing their fight as a struggle for relationship equality? What stops pedophiles from saying that they're just poor, marginalized souls like homosexuals had once been? What's to stop them from saying that they're simply born that way and they can't help it? What's to stop them saying that they deserve inclusion? In the same way that anyone who opposes homosexuality gets typically derided as being a homophobe, what stops people who oppose pedophilia being shunned as a pedophobe? The only thing that stops that evil from happening is if we retain a sense that righteousness matters. There's a righteous way to express our sexuality and there's a wicked way to express our sexuality. There's a healthy way and there's a broken way. There's a moral way and there's an immoral way. If we don't keep righteousness in our armory, so to speak, our left trench age really has no defense against this line of attack. There's nothing in the soft virtue set alone that stops any of these evils from happening. Indeed, if love is love and all expressions of love are equal and no expression of love could ever be considered wrong, then there's really no reason why a paedophile can't say, well, this is a kind of love, so why not me too? Love is love, all love is equal. Too far-fetched? Well, look at this video and look at how liberals struggle to repel any of these ideas. In this video, their worldview is being tested and they're being asked if incest is okay. Now, they know deep down that incest is not okay. They know that it's wrong, but they simply don't have the tools in their armory to repel it. Because they're so locked into this love is love and love is all that matters mindset, they end up having to approve it.
Is there anything wrong with gay marriage?
No.
There's nothing weird about that, do you think?
No, let people love.
As long as they're consenting adults?
Yeah, of course.
That's fine, right?
Yeah.
So do you have any problem? Would you think it would be weird if one of your friends was having sex with their sister?
How does that relate?
Well, they're two consenting adults, so we're just using liberal logic if you think that it's totally normal to have homosexual relationships.
I hate the idea, but if both are happy with it and they don't have any kids, then like, sure, I don't see a huge problem with it.
So you think incest marriage is okay? Nothing weird about that?
No, it's super weird, but if it's not hurting anybody, then I don't care.
So by calling it weird though, aren't you being a bigot and an incest phobe like the liberals are saying the Christians are for saying that gay people are weird? You're an incest phobe? Are you a bigot against
I mean,
incest?
it makes me uncomfortable.
Okay. So is there anything wrong if a Christian or a conservative thinks that homosexuals are weird or it makes them uncomfortable to see these people on television? Do you think that there's something? Do you think they're being bigots because they think that it's perverted and makes them feel uncomfortable to see this gay agenda?
I think it's fine as long as they're not hating on anybody, as long as they're not hurting people and insulting them. You got to just let people do what they want to do. It's like the incest thing. Not into it, but if people are, that's fine with me. It doesn't affect me. I don't want them to have kids because there's some biologically messed up stuff, possibly.
So you would approve of incest marriage then?
I mean, sure. Why not?
What do you say about the people who say that homosexuals are disgusting? What do you feel about those critics of the LGBT community?
I think they're disgusting.
You think they're disgusting?
Yeah.
So you agree that two consenting adults should be able to have a sexual relationship of their preference without being called disgusting or perverts, correct?
Yeah.
So if one of your best friends was having sex with his sister, would you say that's disgusting or perverted?
Yeah.
You would.
Yeah.
So so you're an incest phobe then? So you are judgmental about two consenting adults having a sexual relationship?
Well, the thing about
then?
incest is that if the woman
It's not
were to
natural?
become pregnant, that there's severe birth defects to the child. So
Let's say they're not going to have children though.
well,
so
it could still happen.
they're not going to have children. They're having a consensual incestuous relationship. So you think that's disgusting?
Well, that's fine. If they're not going to have kids, there's no reason for me to judge them.
So there's nothing wrong with a brother and a sister having sexual relations with each
Not
other?
if they're not going to have kids.
Totally normal?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, just checking. If one of your best friends wanted to marry his sister and have a sexual relationship with her, would that be acceptable? Is that unusual?
I would say that's unusual.
Would you say that that's perverted and disgusting?
I don't know. Again, to each their own. It's not really for me.
So it's
to
unusual, but it's not abnormal and perverted and disgusting.
It's not really for me to judge. It's not my place to judge what other people do. I mean, who am I?
If the sister wants it and the brother wants it, go for it, dude.
If the guy has a vasectomy and there's no children involved, would you
No
do?
children?
Yeah. So
I wouldn't tell them not to do what they want to do, but I wouldn't do it.
If your friend here wanted to have sex with her brother, would that be abnormal or
I don't really think people should judge other people or tell them what to do, so
I
would.
You would think that'd be okay?
No, I don't have any opinion either way. It's not my decision whether or not it's okay.
No opinion at all?
Nope.
So if you were to see them making out,
That would be me infringing on their privacy, probably, so.
no, if you're out at a barbecue and they're holding hands and kissing each other, would that make you feel like they're weird?
It's not my business. It's not my decision whether or not someone's weird.
We're just talking about how it would make you feel.
Doesn't matter. I can't control the way it would make me feel. I can just control the way I react to the way it makes me feel.
We want to know how you feel about the
I
incest.
feel like I want to go to the beach.
You're at the beach.
Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. Is incest acceptable in the safe space without being judgmental? If some folks want to practice incest, are they going to be welcomed in your safe space? If there are two consenting adults?
Like, if they're two consenting adults, I mean, I guess so.
So like if a father and his daughter were having a sexual relationship, as long as they were over 18, you wouldn't be judgmental, you would allow them in your safe space? They're part of the LGBT community?
If they both wanted to and were like within totally sober and cognitive
And
states of
consenting adults?
mind, yeah.
Okay. And you're not being sarcastic at all?
No, I'm not.
You're very
no.
serious.
Yeah.
The prevailing liberal ideology of the day has logged people into this mindset that you can never appeal to righteousness. You can never say that anything is morally right or wrong because that would be judgmental. That would exclude and marginalize people, and we don't want that. So you've just got to abandon all ideas of righteousness and let people do whatever they want to do, no matter how disgusting or evil or wicked or perverted those things may be. And it really leaves our society wide open to really immoral behaviors. Now, every so often, people are already pushing at these boundaries to see if the walls are ready to come down, especially around paedophilia. Back in 2013, Cambridge University held a conference for a range of academics to discuss that issue. Philip Tromovich of Shisha University attempted to normalize paedophilia in his speech, saying that normal males are aroused by children. The majority of men are probably paedophiles and hebephiles. Another presentation at the same conference was titled Liberating the Paedophile, a Discursive Analysis. Andrew Gilligan reported on the event for the Times newspaper, and he was left in no doubt that there are attempts right now in parts of the academic establishment to push the boundaries on the acceptability of child sex. Gilligan, in fact, was able to connect the dots quite rightly back to 1967 and see it as part of a continuum, a slippery slope, if you will, that began at the Love Revolution. He said, with the pill, the legalization of homosexuality and shrinking taboos against premarital sex, the 70s was an era of quite sudden sexual emancipation. Many liberals, of course, saw through paedophile information exchanges, cynical rhetoric of child lib, but to others on the left, sex by or with children was just another repressive boundary to be swept away, and some of the most important backing came from academia. Margot Kaplan, a Rutgers Camden professor of law who graduated from Harvard University, argued around the time of that Cambridge conference that paedophiles should be looked upon with more sympathy. In 2018, Miriam Heine made the same argument. She gave a TED Talk at the University of Würzburg in Germany, where she talked about a paedophile acquaintance called Jonas, and she tried to garner support and sympathy for Jonas, claiming that he was just a poor, scared, marginalized soul with a sexual orientation that he didn't choose, and which is just like any other proclivity and orientation.
Jonas is 19 years old. He studies law in Munich. In his spare time, he likes to play soccer. Jonas has a secret which he thinks he cannot share with anyone, not even with his best friend or with his parents. He's just too afraid of anger, rejection, and repulsion. Jonas knows that he has to suppress his sexual drive for his entire life. And he also knows that there will never be a loving and fulfilling partnership that he can enter. Because Jonas is a pedophile. He's only attracted to female children between the ages of 6 and 12 years. Like every other sexual orientation, pedophilia can have different characteristics. For example, it can be heterosexual, it can be homosexual, bisexual. Within the male population, 1 to 2% are considered to be pedophiles. This translates to about 60 million people.
Notice the attempts to garner sympathy and the attempts to normalize it. They can't help who they're attracted to, the poor things. Increasingly, people are also trying to rebrand paedophiles as minor attracted persons in an attempt to remove the stigma around it.
Has moved from being a diagnostic label to being a judgmental, hurtful insult that we hurl at people in order to harm them or slander them. They've not chosen this attraction, just as the rest of us have not chosen whatever our attraction is. You don't get to choose to be heterosexual or to be gay or whatever you are. And you don't get to choose to be a minor attracted person.
I use the term minor attracted person or MAP in the title and throughout the book for multiple reasons. First of all, because I think it's important to use terminology for groups that members of that group want others to use for them. And MAP advocacy groups like Before You Act have advocated for use of the term MAP. They've advocated for it primarily because it's less stigmatizing than other terms like pedophile.
So the current avenue of attack is to try to normalize it and destigmatize it. Now, stigma, by the way, means a mark of disgrace, and I would suggest that there are things which should have stigma attached to them. There are things which are shameful and which are disgraceful and should be regarded as such. We're always trying to destigmatize things these days, but there are some things which are disgraceful and shameful, and pedophilia is certainly one of those things. In Romans 1, the Bible calls unnatural sexual desires shameful desires. There are things for which shame is the appropriate feeling and response. Now, thankfully, at this moment, however, there's still a lot of revulsion to the idea of pedophilia, so the people pushing this agenda are not making huge inroads at the moment. However, you can still see leftist academics very clearly trying to peck away at this boundary now, trying to further demolish our sense of righteousness. Indeed, in many ways, as Andrew Gilligan noted, having already broken down our sense of morality about sexual promiscuity in the 1960s and then homosexuality in the early 2000s, pedophilia has become the next frontier for many of these academics, the next thing to break down. But I'm just going to call it what it is. It's a sin. It's a wicked, depraved sin, and it's a shameful desire. And what I really want to make clear in this episode is that these are not all separate issues. These all lie on the same continuum. They're all part of the same slippery slope. These are all evidence of long-term societal degradation and hatred of righteousness. Watch and see how people keep trying to peck away at this boundary in the coming years. I first made this prediction actually back in 2013, and only since then have all these academics come to the fore. So watch how all this continues to happen in the years ahead, all because we refuse to take a stand for righteousness these days and call a sin a sin. And finally, remember also what I said in the first section of this series, how God gives a grace period to civilizations that are failing, and how during that time he warns repeatedly and he sends his prophets to warn of coming judgment. But if that civilization refuses to heed the warnings and refuses to change direction, and if it passes a point of no return and falls into complete depravity, God will eventually intervene and bring his judgment upon those people. Now, that's what appears to be happening right now. God is being very patient with our society as it goes on this moral slide, this moral decline. But if we don't reverse it, and if we don't repent, and if we find ourselves in a moral cesspit like in Noah's day or in Lot's day, we will suffer the same fate as those civilizations. God's judgment will eventually fall. It's a very unpopular word these days, but repent is the word that this generation needs to hear, because if we don't, God's judgment will eventually fall.